Hi, everyone. Oh, okay. I sound different in a microphone, right? Thanks for coming. This is amazing to see everybody show up, and a lot of people know each other already, so it's already a little community, right? So I am a senior business development manager here at MentorMate, and this topic is very important to me personally and professionally, as I'm assuming it's important to you as you're here. So I've invited Jay to join us as well. He is the president of MentorMate, and he finds this topic very important as well. So I think it's really cool that we've got some of our leadership men involved and taking this forward. No? Oh. You should probably know who MentorMate is because it's all over. So we are an end-to-end digital service provider for clients that range from established startups all the way to enterprise companies. We lead with strategy, design, engineering. So what that means is we're talking to a lot of stakeholders throughout our clients. So when I say I've seen this professionally, I'm seeing a lot of times that women are not heard or are not speaking up in that decision-making way, and it impacts the work that we do. So that's how I found it kind of braiding together. You might have more to add.
I do. Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm Jay Miller. And I'm just going to talk for a couple of minutes. I want to kind of add on to what Sarah's saying about why we wanted to host this event and talk about some statistics and kind of be a little bit provocative to get the panel going. So let's jump in. Generally, it depends on where you look, but roughly the mix in engineering as we're looking at hiring is around 25% women, 75% men, kind of 1 in 4 globally. This is a global average. For MentorMate, we're 10% above that. There's a lot of really interesting cultural reasons for that. You could ask Ali about some of the story about Bulgaria and why that's true, and Kansu is here as well, can talk about Paraguay a bit, but there she is. Hey, Kansu. She's our delivery head of operations and delivery in Paraguay. So globally, we do well. We're 10% above, and every point is really difficult in engineering. It's obviously dominated by men. The story gets better when we look at our office here in Minneapolis. We are more at parity. This goes up and down, but sometimes it's 50-50, but it's always been like this for pretty close to this the whole time. We have more tech-adjacent jobs here. I would describe it, Katie, I think you made that up, but tech-adjacent meaning there are people like myself who, I'm not an engineer, but there are jobs where and we'll talk about this at the panel, where technology is the currency, but you don't have to be an engineer. And I'm hoping that becomes very evident to everyone as we talk more about it. So this is the good news, and now to be in a safe place, I'm going to talk about the bad news. At MentorMate, so from a management standpoint, we define that as someone who's managing other human beings. We're only 17% women. Not good enough, right? It's getting better. We have a lot of programs. We have a lot of leaders that are up and coming. This will improve, but wait, it gets worse. We just did a reorg, and I'm embarrassed to say this, but it's just the truth. And for us to not acknowledge this, that with our new reorg, with the C-suite, it's all men. This is not how we wanted it to be, but it felt disingenuous for us as an employer to not acknowledge that we play a role in this, and we need to do better. So that's kind of the ending note and what I wanted to say here. We're very proud of the progress that we made, but obviously this is not good enough. We have programs underway that we're working on. I'm happy to talk to any of you about this later, about what we're doing to remedy this problem, but we can't do that alone. So thank you for being here. Thank you for engaging, and thank our panelists for being here. And Sarah, thank you for having the idea to have this panel. So we will begin.
Indeed. Thank you so much, Jay and Sarah. And yes, by the way, everyone, this was Sarah's idea. This has taken 6 months to put together, so I'm just going to give her the props. Yes. Oh, I lost something there. I already lost something from my pad. But we're trying to figure out who's going to be the first one to hit their microphone today. Yeah. So we've got a bet on.
Sit on my hands.
Well, thank you so much, Jay and Sarah. We really appreciate you investing in putting this platform together today. This is a really important topic that we're going to talk about today, and we're so glad that you're spending your time with us. It's a beautiful evening, finally, where we're not shivering, so we really appreciate you being here. My name is Laura Best. I'm the founder of Passion Collective. We help professional women rediscover their passion and purpose. We're a community of women women all over the world. We've got about 8,500 women in our broader community. We've even got some Passionados here tonight in the back. Yes. I also have more than 25-ish years of marketing experience. A lot of those years were in the digital marketing space. So I spent many hours at the technology decision table as a marketing person. So both of these topics are very close to my heart, and I'm delighted to be here tonight to help this conversation. So before we start, here's how our time is going to go. It's going to be a little bit different today. You guys aren't just going to sit there and have some nice drinks and food. Oh no, there's going to be a little bit more to it. You're going to hear from three amazing women who you kind of already know who they are, but I'm going to introduce them in a minute. We're going to have a great conversation that hopefully will be inspiring. These are real conversations we're having tonight about the reality of women in technology. Then you will have the chance to do some reflection on your own journey and your own experience. You'll see some prompt sheets at your table. Don't look at them yet. Don't worry, you don't need them just yet. But we will be doing a few minutes of thinking and reflection. And then, almost the best part, sorry ladies, is when you all get to share your thoughts and experiences with each other at the table. So hopefully we're going to generate some real positive energy and magic here today with encouragement and support of each other. So our hope is truly that this is going to be a practical conversation for us all today. We're all in this together, right? And we all need to work together to change the situation. So what are we talking about today? We're talking about women having a voice in technology, but not just a voice, not just a seat at the table. We're talking about women having power and influence at the decision table with technology. And why technology, you may ask? There are so many different industries and disciplines out there, right? Technology is the lifeblood, the DNA of so many, well, practically every organization on the planet, right? And if it isn't, it should be. And if women and underrepresented groups aren't even at that table, let alone having a say, let alone making those decisions, then we've got a big problem on our hands. So the question is that we're going to try and talk about today is how do we change that together? And it's not just how do we bring more voices to the table, but it's also what's the work that we have to do ourselves to get ourselves to that table, but then also be able to have that influence and power once we're there. And then I'm sure there are leaders in organizations here today. What can you do as leaders within organizations to make sure that the space is there? One statistic for you, I think it was in 2021, so it's a couple of years old, but I'm sure it hasn't shifted much. Only 19% of the CIOs in the US are people who identify as women. 19%. Now guess what? Those 19%, their tenure as CIOs is 1.5 years less than men. So the problem that we've got is obviously representation, but the fact that women are getting to the table, but then they're not staying there long enough, right? Once they've reached the heights. So lots to talk about today, and I'm excited, so excited, to bring these three amazing women to have this conversation today. Let me just introduce you to them all. Who shall I start with? It's Jamie, I think, right at the beginning here. So Jamie is, wait for it, she's got lots of titles, CEO, public speaker.
This is why I'm so tired now, I realize.
Yep, she's been up since 3 o'clock this morning as well, everyone, so she's doing great, she's doing great.
Phoenix was a lot warmer than here, I will tell you that.
Isn't it always? She's an author. By the way, you will all get a copy of her book as you leave today. She's also a podcast host, which she's got an amazing podcast called Superpower Success. And in everything that Jamie does, she's helping people reach their potential. She harnesses her leadership experience, including her time in technology at Cargill, to inspire frank and challenging conversations about high performance and healthy change. So Jamie's a great one to talk to about the whole balance idea. Lisa Schlosser. Lisa is passionate about building a future made up of diverse teams, creating the technology that keeps us safe, healthy, and happy. She's currently living this vision as an advisor to Technovation MN, which is an amazing non-profit that inspires girls to build technology to make a positive impact in the community. She was previously Chief Technical Officer at FindLaw and has got 30 years of experience in IT. Now we've got good old Ellie from MentorMate. Last but not least, I kind of did the two and then you in the middle there, Ellie. Ellie Georgieva, did I get that right? It's kind of 60% right. Oh boy, sorry, Ellie. She's the Global VP of Delivery here at MentorMate. She's got 20 plus years of experience in IT, and she's got a master's in computer systems and technology, so I think she knows what she's talking about, right? She was one of the first members of the MentorMate team in Bulgaria, and one of her main motivators is improving lives of people around the world with her work. So I think that's a common theme for us women, right? The positive impact that technology is having and our work is having. As Global VP of Delivery, Ellie's main responsibility is implementing innovative processes, yes, I said that the English way, and ensuring success of client goals. So thank you all three of you for coming here tonight. Or this afternoon, I should say. It's still light outside. So a couple of questions to get us warmed up here. First of all, what is one lesson each of you have learnt about claiming your voice as you've built your career, either in technology or business? What's one lesson you can share? Jamie, do you want to start?
Yes, yeah. So it's really hard to pick one because I've learned a lot of things, but my background is at Cargill, and I was telling this story, we had a prep call, and they're like, share that one. So I'm going to pick this one to share. So I graduated with an IT degree in the 90s, right? Anybody else in the IT classes in the 90s? Mm-hmm. How many of us were there? Not many. And luckily, there's more now. But I chose IT not because I had a passion for IT, because I knew it was the future. And all of my friends in the business school were in females, right? We're doing HR and marketing and finance, and I was like, that just doesn't sound exciting. No offense if there's any finance or HR people in the room, right? It just doesn't sound exciting, so I'm gonna go in a place that is different, right? It feels like that's where the future's going. And so I got an IT degree. I also got an international business degree, which is what brought me to Cargill. And I started at Cargill and had an amazing, probably one of the best leaders still to this day. We do a lot of, we call it conscious leadership, so we help leaders evolve into being more conscious leaders. And so back in that day, I remember I would describe my leader as a conscious leader. And I was miserable. So I started my job in IT. I was the person at the computer lab that was like paying people, like begging them to help me with Java code just to get through the class, because that was not what was like, that's not where my passion was. And so I knew when I took an IT role, I was going to have to be technical. But I didn't love the technical part. I loved the business part and the change part of it and what technology could do. And 6 months into my role, my wonderful leader sat me down, did a 6-month performance review, and she said, we need to talk. And I was like, okay, right? I'm 22 years old. And she said, you're not really great at IT, like really technical stuff. And she said, I don't think it's where your passion's at. And my gut reaction was, I know, right? Like, I'm feeling it, you're feeling it, this is great. And then the moment it came out of my mouth, I was like, I'm gonna lose my job. This is the conversation that then she's gonna say, you're no longer gonna be here. But instead what she said was, but there are so many other things you're good at, business analysis, project management, working with the business. We put you at 22 in front of the business and like, you can translate everything. It's just not the technical pieces. And she said, give me 6 months. I need you to still do what you're doing, but let's get you into the role that's the right role for you. What would have been the easy answer for her? To get rid of me and hire the technical person she actually needed. But instead, she allowed me to be who I was, and she knew there was something the company needed from me, and she put me in that role, right? She helped me figure out that path. And so I will never forget her. I speak in front of thousands of people in keynotes, and I talk about her because that was so instrumental. And so how many of us as leaders, as women, either have had advocates for ourselves, like for us, or are advocates, right, for others when we don't fit the mold in exactly what we need. So that was me claiming my voice before I even knew I had a voice, right?
Well, there's advocacy there, and there's also intention around career building, even though you had no idea at the time, but that's what she was trying to help you with, right? That intentionality around your career building in technology, which is incredible. Yeah. Thank you, Jamie. Ellie, what about you?
Well, this is an interesting question. So my experience is completely different from Jamie's because I've started from the engineering and then started moving and going more into the client facing, into the business. So there were many cases when needed to think of how to react, how to approach a situation. I want to put the question a little bit into the current world and the remote working, where we are all working remote. But this is like example. MentorMate is working remote since the beginning of MentorMate. The engineering core is in Bulgaria, and the business headquarters sits here in Minneapolis. So since we started the company, we had to be working remotely. And this for me, it's like a lesson that is learned, that we as leaders need to be able to listen to ourselves and be very adaptive to change. I do remember the moment when the pandemic hit. And it was that moment that nobody expected. And I was sitting with my boss in Sofia, and I was telling him, hey, I'm canceling my vacation. I had a ski vacation in the Alps, 100 kilometers from the first cases in Europe. And I told him, I'm going on the ski vacation in 5 days, but I'm canceling, and we need to start planning what we are doing in 1 week. He was like, yeah, we can plan, but we have time. And I was like, no, we don't have time. We have to really act right now because something might happen. And for our business could be could affect it very much because many people are globally. And we started planning. And you know what happened? We moved the company with 0 events for 2 days over the weekend, from working in physical offices to working in thousands physical locations. All the people, all the engineering, everybody. And we did that only because of this planning and being able to look into situations differently. So I do believe as women, we can have different perspective on the table. And when we are not afraid to share that perspective, this is what can make the difference. Like me stepping in there and pushing on, let's start making the plan, so if something happens, we know what to do. And basically for 3 days we made the plan, and on Friday we started executing it because it hit. And then on Saturday and Sunday, the whole company went remote. Monday morning, everybody were working, like they're in the office, but they were in their apartments and houses.
But that's a big lesson, Ellie, because I myself, and I know many women in technology over the years, may not have had the confidence to be able to share your opinion in that way, regardless of what came back to you, right? And I'm sure it was a very professional response, but it wasn't the same opinion, right? So that sounds like the lesson that you've had from that, right? I'm going to stand my ground and share my opinion regardless of the outcome, because I know it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, this absolutely goes all together with the fact that I'm a believer that if you want to share something and you have an opinion, you shouldn't be thinking, I'm a woman and maybe they won't listen to me. If you think that the other side is not going to listen to you, most likely this is what's going to happen. And I believe that you should believe in yourself, like I did. I believed in myself, I had my position, I shared my position, I presented it. Of course, it should be with the right arguments, why this, and then be actionable. Not just throw a statement out there without doing anything, but be part of the change and the actions that need to be taken. But then, if you don't believe you can do it, and that's true, then the other people are not going to believe. And this is, I think, one of the biggest things that is preventing women to be successful and to have their voice. They're afraid. They don't believe they can have their voice.
And for me, the word comfort is the trigger word. Mm-hmm. That conversation that you had is never going to be comfortable. So if you're waiting for it to be comfortable, you're losing your voice. It's going to be uncomfortable to stand up for yourself that first time. We have to get over that. That's probably the biggest hurdle as women that we have, is it's not waiting for the perfect time and the stars to align. Now is the time. It's in the moment, being uncomfortable, but standing for what you believe in. I think it's beautiful.
And don't be afraid.
Right.
And I think, I agree with everything you two are saying. To counter as well, though, organizations need to create the space for those conversations, right? Which is something we'll talk about in a little bit. Lisa, so Technovation is empowering girls to build and leverage technology in their community. And these are young women, young women. Much of this is skills-based, right? But so much of it is about confidence. And I think back to, I've got a 12-year-old daughter, and seeing the stuff she's doing at school and seeing how confidence is playing a part in that, I'm like, man, I wish I had that, back in the 80s/90s when I was building my career and at school, right? You've spent 30 years building your career in technology. Now you're out of that. As you reflect on that, what role did confidence play for you as a Chief Technology Officer?
Yeah, so a little bit more about Technovation Minnesota. So we work with girls, and girls form teams, and they think about their community. And they build a mobile application to solve a problem in their community that they can use technology to solve. And so they also build a business case and a pitch. So confidence for them is being built by the fact that they're working side by side with people that look like them and understand them, they're friends. They are getting hands-on experience, so they're actually building a mobile app. And they also have a large support community. So there's a lot of people that are helping them and encouraging them along the way to continue to pursue technology. And so they're building amazing confidence. And man, when I see them present and do their live pitches, it's like I never could have done that when I was that age. Right. Very, very different. For me personally, confidence is about preparation. So as an introvert, doing a panel like this, it's like, well, what are our goals? What questions are you going to ask me? Like, I want to be able to sort of think about these things and be able to prepare. And that gives me confidence to be able to sit up here. I like to write my notes just in case I want to glance at them. And I remember I did this thing. You can see it's on LinkedIn if you really want to look it up. It's called Riding in Cars with CIOs. So there was this guy that wanted to do this, and he asked me if I'd be interested in doing that. And I'm like, sure. That's one thing about me. Like, I'll pretty much try anything the first time. And so I said, sure. And I said, can you send me the questions beforehand? And he goes, no, I really like to make it, kind of spur of the moment and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, not working for me. So I said, fine. So what I ended up doing was going back and watching the postings that he already had out there, the shows that he already did. And I jotted down every question he asked. And then I went and said, okay, if it was me being asked that question, how would I do it? And I felt so much more at ease when I was sitting in the car than just blindly being asked questions. So confidence for me is about preparation.
That's awesome. And Lisa, what was your lesson? These two shared their lessons about building their career. What lesson do you have about claiming your voice at the table?
Yeah, my lesson probably the biggest one of the things that was game changing for me was probably like 8 to 10 years into my career, and so I worked for Thomson Reuters for many years, and I was on their cash cow. I worked on Westlaw. I was doing software development. It's like no one ever left Westlaw. Like once you were working on that was what you do. And a position opened up in the data center. And I had all these colleagues going, why on God's green earth do you want to go there? Like, why do you want to work there? And I'm like, I don't know, and I applied for the job and I got it. And what I realized was it was a whole new technology world. It was an entirely new language. So instead of compiling and testing and coding, it was storage and networks and hardware and all this stuff that I just really didn't know. So I learned a ton about a whole new area of technology that I didn't know before. I had this whole new network that I didn't know any of these people. I didn't have to. I became a better developer because I understood more about what the code I was writing, how it reacted and played in those hardware environments. But most important too is it beefed up my resume, and it was amazing how having that experience all of a sudden opened me up to like other business units within TR and just a whole nother world, because I had this broad range of experience that was very valuable to my company. So that was a, and oh, I should say too, I hated that job.
I love that.
Oh, I hated it. It's like shit was breaking all the time. I'd come in the morning and it was just like, okay, like what conference call am I going into now? And I remember talking to one of my colleagues and I'm like, how can you do this? Like I had my little lists and it's like, I wanted to cross things off and I wanted to get this stuff done, and I'd come in and I would go home and I'd be like, I did nothing. But he gave me a really interesting perspective that I've thought about many times throughout my career. He said, you know, every day I get to come in and I get to work on something completely different. And I was like, wow. I mean, that was not the way I was thinking about it. So it just, you know, I hated that job. If someone would ask me if I would do it again, I would say absolutely. But some really good lessons in that.
Experience is important.
Yeah.
Sounds like that's the lesson, right? Even if you enjoy it or not.
Yeah.
So there's conflicting evidence about exactly how far gender parity or gender equality has gone in the workplace. A recent statistic said that 10% of Fortune 500 companies were being led by women. How many of you think that's great? There was quite a lot of news coverage saying, wow, this is amazing, we've hit this incredible 10% milestone, woohoo! And I think most of us are thinking, 10%? What about the 90%, right? What is your opinion, panel dearest, about what that means for women in the workforce, that 10%, the progress that we're making? Is it good enough?
I mean, I'll start. You know, the data that Jay showed, there's 3 reports that I read religiously. One is the McKinsey & Company, Women in the Workforce. Mm-hmm. Women are underrepresented at every level in the pipeline, in corporate pipeline. In general, we do a pretty good job of the entry level, but as you move up is where women start to fall off. So the data that we showed here is exactly what's happening across the board. And that's why all of a sudden, instead of 50-50, you know, it's 25% women, 75% across. And so I don't even think the data is conflicting. I think it's just bad.
Yeah.
But I will say, you know, you can change what you can measure, and you should measure what matters. And, you know, at Thomson Reuters, when we measured and said, we want to make a difference in director level, and we had to make a whole bunch of changes, but we did move the needle a little bit. It still wasn't parity by any means, but yeah, I think the statistics that McKinsey talked about, for every 100 men, 87 women get promoted, and 82 women of color get promoted. So it's even harder if you're a woman of color.
Yeah, and the burnout rates they talked about in the McKinsey report too, about the fact that, you know, women at director level in particularly are burning out faster than men for many different reasons, obviously, which plays a huge part in that. Jamie, what do you think?
I'm like scribbling notes feverishly as we're talking here, because so many things are coming to my mind. Being a woman who left the IT space, right, but still works with a lot of companies and leaders in that space, this is an interesting one for me. And I think it is, as Lisa said, across the board. The other thing that's really interesting is what I don't think women understand is that our strength in emotional intelligence, right, and our ability to be empathetic and to understand where people are at is the leadership of the future. Take IT out of it, take whatever your degree is in, I don't care, right? We are naturally inclined. Studies would prove that we're naturally inclined with those strengths, and I don't think we use them often enough. And so when I hear Jay talk about the statistics, first off, I just want to give you kudos for standing in front of a group of women and sharing that.
Indeed.
Because a week ago I posted something on LinkedIn and it was the Maya Angelou quote, and I'm not going to get it perfect, right? But it's not until we know better that we can do better. And so talking about what we need to learn. We need to come here and say, you know what? We need to do something different. But a lot of people come and they know better and they forget the do better part. Right? And so that's what I think today is like, now we know and we need to do something different. I truly believe, and I see women, I just had this conversation with an executive at Medtronic last week right? Not in IT, but she said, I want to take this role, and I'm getting pressure from my boss. These two leaders are fighting over her, right, to come in and run their division and be the successors. And they're literally fighting over her and putting her in a really tough spot. And she said, I don't know what to do. And we started talking through it. And she knew what she wanted to do. I got down to it and asked her the right question. She knew what she wanted to do. But she was allowing someone else to take her voice and tell her what they thought was right for her.
Right.
This is what I think is happening. Because even when we get a seat at the table, it doesn't mean we have a voice at the table. We bring the voice, right? Even in fear of, I'm going to say something wrong, or I'm going to say something that isn't popular, that doesn't mean you don't use your voice in those situations. And so I think it just starts with us lifting each other up and saying, we have to say the thing that's unsaid, right now, that we're seeing that no one else is paying attention to, because as women, we see a lot more that's under the surface. And for the men in the room, you need the women to speak up, because they're seeing the culture issues, right? That's what I do for a living. They're seeing the culture issues. They're seeing the areas where the teams are going to start to deteriorate if we don't do something else. But we have to create the space, and we have to ask the right questions to allow them to share.
Well, Jamie, I completely agree with that. However, what if you're a woman and you've been in the industry 10, 15, 20 years, right? And you've tried that, and there have been negative repercussions to you sharing your voice, or perhaps a man has said something after you 5 minutes in a meeting and that idea has got accepted and yours hasn't, right? I know it's crazy, happens sometimes.
It's never happened.
Happens sometimes. It can feel like sometimes, I don't know how you all feel about it, but sometimes it's like, well, why bother? You know what I mean? I've tried. They're not listening. Right. So why bother? What would you say to somebody who's feeling like that, who maybe is felt knocked back, or maybe in the performance review, it's like, you know, you're great, but ...
Right.
How do you create that resilience in yourself to be able to stand up and say the things that you're encouraging us to do?
It's a learned thing.
That's a whole topic,
right?
I know.
It is a whole other panel. It's a muscle that you have to develop. But here's what I'll tell you is, when something like that happens, and this is the way I was in my tech career, is it's actually more about the other person than it is about you. So we kind of need to get over it. Like, it really is. If you've got somebody that took your idea, male or female, like, let's be clear, this can happen with either gender, right? I've experienced it on both sides. It's actually more about them and their confidence than it is about me. So how do you move through that and learn from it and say, what am I going to take from this? And the question I ask myself, I mean, I'm an entrepreneur, right? I just made it through the last 3 years in a company that's still, the doors are open. So moment after moment of like, getting knocked down, get back up. But the question you have to ask yourself is, what is this preparing me for? Because I believe every single one of those situations is preparing you for the next battle, for the next growth moment, right? For that next thing. So instead of saying, why me? Why did this happen? Why do we not have the numbers we need? Take a step forward instead of kind of that step backwards, and say, what can we do differently? What is this preparing us for? I think it's a mindset thing. And I know that's not easy. It's learned. But I think these kind of rooms are the kind of rooms we have to be able to have those vulnerable conversations.
Absolutely. And we're going to talk about culture in a minute too, which plays an important part of that as well. Ellie, what do you think about, and certainly you've got a different perspective, you know, spending so much of your time in Bulgaria, working all over the world, but working with a lot of Americans as well. What is your perspective on the equity in the workplace and where it is right now?
Well, I don't think Bulgaria is much different than the US. Basically, I want to share that story. Like, I'm coming from engineering university. So you can imagine the numbers there are not much different than IT. And they are like the women who are 30%, let's say. So I guess it's very similar here. And like what I've seen women do basically is they step back. They are afraid. They don't think of what are the strengths and weaknesses. And here is what I'm having as a lesson in my work background. Like, I focus on the strengths, and what I'm trying to do is to compensate weaknesses with people I trust, regardless where they are, regardless if they're women, men. This doesn't matter really. but be able to work with people together because we are humans and we are not a single person achieving a goal. I'm trying to get the people I can learn from, but also form like a team. And what Jamie said, like, we have to be thinking on the other side. It's not about me, it's about what we want to accomplish. But when we're putting me as a woman in the center, this can get us backwards instead of looking into the goals and what could be done. So this is like, it starts from the university across the globe, I think, and it goes after that in the C-levels. And it is up to us to show that we are equal. I don't believe we are not equal. If somebody believes in that, gotta rethink it. we are all equal, and even women are in worse position, you know, like we're women, we have to take care of the family, everything that's the second and third job after we are done at 5 in the day. So this is what gotta be the mindset. How I can, what are my strengths, and from whom I can learn, and then to trust to people.
Mm-hmm. So believe in ourselves and believe in each other.
I think you have to ask yourself too, like, I mean, to your point, Laura, if you're sitting at the table and you're feeling like your voice isn't heard over and over and over, maybe you need to take a step back too and sort of think about, is this the culture that I want to work in? Or maybe maybe the way your voice is coming across isn't being heard in the right way. So there's a great book out there called How to Say It for Women by Phyllis Mendel. And it's all about, like, women use words like, well, I feel like we should do this, you know, program, or they use the F word a lot, you know, or this could be a crazy idea, but, you know, I'm thinking this. And those are things that if even though you're saying them and you're a voice at the table, if you're saying them in certain ways, you're just not going to be heard. You're not a crazy person, you know, so it isn't a crazy idea, and it's okay to ask a question. I mean, those are all very good things to do, and I love that book, and I read it, you know, probably every couple of years or something, just to remind myself, and I find myself writing emails and then erasing them and rewriting them, you know, the way they should be written.
Well, and basically working in this world like right now in the IT, in the remote, the way we say things matter the most, because Lisa, you said, like, I feel. Like, there is no moment of feelings in business, I believe. We are humans, and we do have feelings, but when you sit in front of the camera and the computer, and you don't see the other person, and you don't see the reactions, and you don't see the body posture, what feelings? you most likely you would feel bad from any criticism. But what I do say, it's we are humans. We have to be thinking on the other side, and they might have a bad day. You don't know, but you cannot know when they're on the other side in the other camera, and you just don't meet them. So this is making even harder for us. How to read the people reactions.
And that's what I'm thinking, as you're both talking, I'm thinking, you know, the reason that, and I'm going to generalize, many women use filler words, the just, the so, I feels, is because the environment isn't set up for us to be as direct in our communication as men are without the repercussions, right? Well, she's a bit of a bitch. She didn't put a smiley face on her email back. Like, you know what I mean? Come on, everybody, you know, how many times do you look at your email and do what, you know, Lisa doesn't take the words out and then worry about how you're going to be perceived as being a bit cold? You know, should probably be a bit warmer, right? That's the reason we're in this crazy sort of never-ending circle. So the question is, how do we break out of it? And Lisa, I love what you're saying. You kind of have to rise above it, same as you, Ellie, right? And decide that, yes, that's the situation, and this is what I am going to take control of.
And there's such things as power words. So when I hear you say feel, right, I'm a high intuitive, so I feel a lot. That's literally how I make decisions. But even switching the word feel for I believe this is the right thing to do, not I feel this is the right thing to do, believe is a stronger word, right? It's more conviction in it than feel is. So there's these words you can start to swap out that I think make your communication have a bit more punch, meaning like I'm serious about this, right? And I'm going to stand up for this versus it being a step back in your language, as you talked about.
This is exactly how you make your voice on the table be heard with the words, picking the words correctly.
And it's tough for women because you have to be extremely well-skilled and competent, but you also have to be likable. Because
Right?
if you're not likable, that's a problem.
It's
And
the
men really don't.
invisible bias.
Yeah.
And so that's a really, another trigger word for me, but I get it, is when I reached a point in my career, I realized that what I was striving for was not being liked, it was being respected. There's a huge difference, ladies. Right? I don't have to always be the one that pleases everybody. I can be the one that makes them think differently. And that's a powerful thing as well, in a very respectful way. But do you want to be liked or do you want to be respected? And I think that's, when you show up as wanting to be respected, you can stand your ground in a different way than wanting to leave and make sure everybody likes you at the end of the day. Everyone's not going to like you no matter what you say.
Right.
Right? We are in that world right now. So just how are you showing up in a way that's garnering respect? I think that's success.
Well, let's talk about culture in organizations, because respect is a huge piece of that. So, Jamie, I forgot to say at the beginning, sorry, you're the CEO of Keystone Group International. And your organization helps other organizations build and nurture their cultures to create success. So you're all about culture. Now, managing conflict is a huge reality in many cultures, right? It's just a matter of fact every day. And often, we women, we get the sharp end of conflict, right? It can be difficult managing conflict at work, period, for everyone, but particularly for women. How can organizations create a more inclusive space for conflict to happen and be managed so we do feel more comfortable having those conflict-based conversations?
So you use the key word, and that word is space.
Space, yes.
We have to create the space for the conflict to happen. Because I want to reframe our perspective on conflict, right? Cultures that are really strong are built on a foundation of positive conflict. So we're wired to think the word conflict is negative. It's actually not a negative word, but most conflict becomes negative because in the absence of trust, when I don't trust you and something goes wrong, it's negative, right? But we have to build on that foundation of trust before we need to actually lean on it. And that's where, I mean, we see it every day in organizations big and small, is they're not creating the space for the trust to be built. So when the conflict has to happen, the conflict can be positive. Again, you're always going to deal with a situation where someone's having a day, right? Or I said something wrong and now that's just life. That's life at home. That's life. I've got 4 Gen Zers, right? That's like I'm like, did I say this wrong today? Like, right? The death stare that I get. But that's right. That's life. Again, back to pleasing. We're not here to like say it right all the time. But when we have trust built, when I have an off day, my team is like, listen, it's just an off day, right? Or I can just say, I'm going to shut my door. I don't want the funk to spread to all of you today. So, right? It's where I'm at. But that's how we breed, I think, a more positive conflict. And here's the thing. Creativity and innovation that grows your business only happens in conflict. It only happens when we're coming together and you and I have totally different perspectives on this, and then we come to a better solution for the company and for ourselves. So when we shy away from conflict, we're limiting ourselves and our growth, and we're limiting the growth of our company. And so when we come in, we are like, let's go. I tell leaders, I say, if your meetings are boring, you need to come up with a question that's like a grenade in the middle of the table and manage it appropriately, right? Not negatively, but let's have different conversations than we're having today, because that's just boring, right? And it's not creating the growth in the business that we need. So when we talk about culture, it's a lot more holistic, but space is the key word there.
And as women, we're often taught we need to be the peacekeepers, right? Or the guardians of everybody.
Right.
We need to take care of everyone. We need to fix everything. So as a leader of an organization, what do you say to other leaders who want to change that dynamic? You know, and if you are a woman who's like, well, I'm used to fixing, I'm used to taking care of, how do you create that space for that to become a reality? It's a hard leap from being a caretaker to a, soldier jumping on a grenade in a meeting room.
So the first thing, there's a ton of things, and it'd be a whole nother show here. But the first thing that comes to mind is we have to ask different questions. I think this is in general for our cultures, as women, as men, in our businesses. We have got to start asking different questions and creating the space for the conversations around those questions, because we're all on like autopilot burnout right now. Like, just get through the day, go through the motions, do the things I do. I think 10 years from now, we're gonna be seeing studies on how like our brains have just gone to mush, because we really aren't asking the hard questions. And that's what we see in culture is we're able to come in and ask the hard questions, not joking. I mean, we have leaders that leave at the end of a session one day and they're like, this was freaking therapy for us as a group, because we aren't gonna ask ourselves these things, right? So how can you start to be the catalyst to just say, curiosity and respectfully, what if? What do we think about this? I think curiosity is always the key. If you pose it in a question, people can't get as defensive, right? It's not seen as political because you're just being curious. What if we thought about this differently? And then just let that land on the table and let the conversation happen. But we are moving from meeting to meeting. We are not letting the intentional conversations happen. We're just trying to get done what we have to get done. And it is about, I'm just going to keep saying, it's about creating the space.
Yeah, indeed.
Is that clear? Creating the space?
Create the
Write
space.
that down.
We got lots of space.
A little bit of a soapbox. Thank you for allowing me to do that.
So we're coming to the end of our time at the panel here. I feel like we're literally scratching the surface. But what is one action for each of you, one action that you think we can all take after today in terms of claiming not just our place at the table, but also having that power and influence at the decision-making table with technology? One thing we can do. Lisa.
Well, I thought of a lot of things. It's hard to pick one, but honestly, I think I'm going to say the fact that nobody sat at this table, the front table, it's like, sit in the front. You know, if you want your voice heard, if you want to contribute to the conversation, if you want to be engaged, it is so much easier to sit in the front. I started doing that, and it could just be because I'm getting older and it's harder to see and harder to hear, and you know, but if there's a front row, I'm in it, and it keeps me engaged, and it's awesome.
What I can add to that, really what I'm seeing is that women are afraid and then they don't believe in themselves. So this would be the first thing to correct. And instead of dividing why men don't respect us, thinking of, hey, how did other people can respect us and trust us? For me, trust and respect is the first two things to be thinking about. How the other engineers would trust us, and how can I make them respect me, what they can learn from me and what I can bring on the table to give to them. And this is what it's getting to the overall results, and this is what basically the business values and how it's building this trust in the organization. Well, this is what would help us. So this, for sure, trust and respect would be the two words that you should be thinking on. And how the others would hear you.
Love that. Yeah, so foundational. Thanks, Ellie. Jamie.
For me, and depending on where you're at in your career, it's either find your power or know your power. I was speaking to a women's group a couple weeks ago, and I got done, and there was some Q&A, and someone asked me, like, what's a word? Like, what's your word that you would use to describe yourself? And without missing a beat, I said powerful. And it was like she said, I can't believe she said that. I mean, in a good way, but I could see the kind of stiffening in the room. And what I realized is, so when I say I'm powerful, it doesn't mean I have power over people. And I think women shy away from that. It's because I know who the hell I am, the good, the bad, and the ugly. There's a little bit of all of it, right? I have superpowers and I have huge gaping weaknesses that I have to build around me. But that is power. Because when I know who I am, I can go through life and I can have stuff that does not go my way and doesn't go according to plan, because it never goes according to your plan, right? There's a broader plan, but I can always be in my power and come back to that. And I think so many of us give our power away, and we blame other people for it, but come on, like, we're giving it to them. We're allowing them to take it from us. So I think it's find your power, know your power wherever you're at, right? My beautiful cousin who's here, who's how old? I don't even, 27, right? Who just told me today she was coming, but I was so excited she was here, right? My 17-year-old daughter, I bring her to stuff like this typically because that's how you find your power. And it's okay if you don't have it yet, but you got to figure out how to find it because I think it's the only way, to be honest, it's the only way we change business. And we are the ones that are going to change it. So you got to find it.
Yeah, I love that. What a great way to end. All right, everyone. Well, thank you, ladies. Amazing women.